Hey guys, it's Tsetsi. We're gathered here today to discuss leeches once again. So today what I'm doing is actually reviewing about 10 different containers that you can use to keep your leeches and emphasizing the benefits and the bad points about each container and the different kinds of materials for the containers where you can keep your leeches. Now let's start with this one. This right here is a big glass jar, as you can see. It is very huge. I am not sure what the volume of it is, but it says 6,200 milliliters. So that's over 6 liter jar. And it's got a glass lid, and it's got the rubber lining on the lid, or whatever, the rubber seal. Okay, now let's talk about this jar and if it's good for your leeches. Basically, the advantages of this jar is, there's a couple of advantages. One is that it's big, so you can fit a lot of leeches in here. A big leech population can live in this jar very happily. It's basically huge, so I would say it could fit about 200 leeches. Yeah, upwards of 200. And it's a good idea if you're gonna use something as big as this. It's essentially like an aquarium for the leeches, so you might want to put like nice rocks or things like that at the bottom to make them feel good and feel at home, you know. And also the leeches do tend to shed their skin, so when they shed their skin, the rocks will really help. And another good feature of this jar is that the neck of it is very, very wide. So when you go and you take your leech handling device that I've talked about in my previous video, and you want to go and reach down for a leech, it fits perfectly. This is a 9-inch tongue for the leeches, so it does handle them perfectly. It's the right fit. Now, another good thing about it is that it's glass, so it's going to keep them nice and cool, and I think they'll be pretty happy in there. So this is a very good option if you can find it. I found this one at TJ Maxx. Over here in London it's TK Maxx. So if you can find one and buy it, this one was about, I would say, 7 or 8 pounds, so it should be around that same price in dollars. Now let's see, and let's talk about how you're going to get the water out. So you would have to, when you fill up the jar about 3/4 of the way, then you would have to be very careful when you pour out the water not to pour out any leeches with the water, because there'll be a lot of leeches that will come down with the water. So another alternative is to put down like a coffee cup inside and just scoop out the excess water and then pour in some fresh new water. That's one way of doing it. It is quite big though for easy changing of their water. Now let's move on to our next container. This one here is like a tall glass bottle, and let's demonstrate how easy it would be to handle the leeches in it. The tongs don't fit all the way, so this one is quite tall for the tongs to reach down far inside the bottle. And the leeches, they actually hang out, well, sometimes they hang out on the walls of the container, but most of the time they hang out on the bottom. So you won't be able to reach your leeches. You would have to somehow pour them out. And so this is not a comfortable container. Plus it's, you know, sometimes with glass containers, the leeches do tend to slip out easier than with a plastic container actually. So it's not the best choice. I wouldn't go for this one. This one I would pass on when I see it at the store. All right, let's take a look at another container. This one is a ceramic container, and it's just basically like a pot with a lid. Now, the reason I wouldn't use a container like this is because it would be very, very easy for the leeches to, first of all, get out. They do tend to crawl out from the tiniest little spaces. So this wouldn't be a good idea. All of my leeches will get out. All of them, I'm sure, in a matter of a couple of hours, because it doesn't close tightly enough. It doesn't make a good seal. And another bad thing about this container is it's going to not allow any sunlight in, which I've explained earlier. You need the sunlight for the, well, you don't need direct sunlight, but you need a little bit of sunlight for the leeches. Otherwise, they don't live happily, and they will wilt and die. So you don't want direct sunlight, but you do want some sunlight. Okay, now let's move on to the next container. This one is a fancy schmancy little container. Now that's if you just want to, you know, show off in front of your friends that you have some leeches, and you know, just to enjoy them and look at them in a pretty container. This one would be actually ideal because it does close very tightly. So you can actually buy like a sugar, what do you call it, sugar container, and put them in, but make sure it closes very, very snug on top. Otherwise they will crawl out. This one has like a inner lip, you see, so it provides additional sealing of the top. And it's just a small container, but you can put like a finger width of water in it and put about, I would say this one would contain about 5 leeches, so you can keep about 5 of them in there. So if you don't have any more than 5 leeches, a container like this would be perfect, and it is glass, and just try and keep them away from direct sunlight. All right, let's move on to the next container. This one is a metal container. Now in the past, I think in ancient times, they used to keep leeches in metal containers for some reason. I wouldn't do it, even though the neck is big, so it's going to be easy to maneuver the leeches around if you want to handle them, if you want to get them in and out and change their water. It's easy, right? So that's nice, but it's going to close them up from sunlight, and that's not advisable because for some reason they need a little bit of sunlight, even though they live, you know, in natural environments. They live on the bottom of the lakes, and at the bottom of the lake there's not that much sunlight, but some sunlight does come through, and sometimes they swim up to the top of the lake, so they do need sunlight, and this container is not going to provide it. Now let's see if we can find another alternative. This one here is another glass jar, and let's fit our tongs in there. Now the tongs reach almost all the way to the bottom, but almost doesn't count, does it? If you have leeches bunched up at the bottom of this jar, you're not going to be able to reach them. Although, you know, the ones that are hanging out at the walls will be easily reachable with this tongs, with this tool. And I'll put links below of where you can get the tool and where you can get the leeches and where you can buy maybe some containers as well. And now let's move on to some of our plastic containers. This one here is just a plastic bottle, like drink bottle. And as you can see, I've already got leeches in there. It's actually quite convenient. The neck of the bottle is not the thinnest, the smallest neck. It's actually got a pretty wide neck. So I can easily handle my leeches. I can actually pull them out with my fingers if I wanted to. But even with the tongs, you know, you can easily fit them in. They fit right in. You get the leeches. Oh, there's one already hanging on the tongs. So yeah, so this kind of container, if you don't have that many leeches, is actually a pretty good one. In here I've got about maybe 10-15 leeches, and as you can see, the water's not all the way up because you want some air in the container for them. Now let's move on to another kind of container. This one is just like a bigger bottle. Now the reason why plastic containers are actually superior than glass containers for leeches is because, well, first of all, it doesn't really matter to them what kind of container they're going to be in, but it matters to you. And it matters to you because when you go to dump out the water and to change their water, which happens, you know, once a week, then you're going to be having a much easier time with a plastic container. And I'll show you what collects on the bottom of the container. That's, I don't know if you can see it, but it's very sort of slimy skins that come off the leeches, and they do sort of float in there. So this particular water hasn't been changed, so it does need changing. And when I go to dump out this water, as you can see, it easily pours off, and all the leech skins are floating in there, and you see there's no really leeches floating in the water. So I can dump out the water, the dirty water, without any leeches coming out. So that's what makes it easy and convenient for me. Same thing with the small bottle that I just showed you, the small plastic bottle. It's very easy to dump out the water and to change it. With the glass containers, for example, such as this jar, what happens oftentimes is I go to dump out the water and the leeches come off with it, because the glass walls of this container here, this jar, is very slippery. It's glass, so they can't, their suction cups can't really grasp the walls very well. So when I go to dump out the water, I sometimes can lose leeches in the sink, and that's not very advisable. And sometimes they crawl back out and, you know, all over the kitchen. But you know, if you're into that kind of thing, then you maybe you'll enjoy it, but I don't. What happens when the leeches get out? They can't stay wet, so when they don't stay wet, they dry up and they die. And that's very sad. And sometimes I find dried up, dead leeches in my house, and you know, it just means that I haven't been that careful when changing their water. Usually it's the changing of the water that gets some of the leeches lost or allows them to escape. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps up our little review. This particular container is another another plastic bottle, and as you can see, I prefer plastic, and I keep my leeches in plastic. And you'll see the skins floating in there. See, there's quite a bit of skins here. So when I go to pour out the water, as you can see, all of the water comes off with the skins, but none of the leeches. So that's what I like to see. They're all stuck to the walls of the container, and I don't lose any of them this way. If you have any other questions or want to know anything about containers or leeches, don't hesitate to ask. I will answer all the questions you have. Obviously, you like leeches, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You're curious about them, and I'm here to help. So go ahead and ask your questions. Until then, bye! you.